Hey everyone, this is Belinda Carr. Welcome back to the Boost AC podcast, where we dive into the world of construction and explore the stories of people and companies who are shaping the future of our industry. We've got yet another exciting podcast for you today. I'm speaking with Matt DiBara, owner of DiBara Masonry and the Contractor Consultants. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
You've created quite a name for yourself in our industry, specifically in the contractor space. Going through your LinkedIn profile, you have a ton of things that you're juggling right now. Like I mentioned, you're the owner of DiBara Masonry. You come from a family of masons. You also have the contractor consultant business, which helps people hire and retain talent. I believe you're writing a book right now, or you've published a book. Tell us a little bit about how all of this got started.
Well, I was bored. No, I'm only kidding. Um, I think it just evolved. Like most people, it evolved from doing things that I love. I mean, my great grandfathers started in construction, both of them. So my grandfather's father were home builders, and that love for the craft passed down to my grandfather, and my father and my uncle did it. And so that's all I really knew growing up. And so I grew within that family business, and these other things came out of a place of me wanting to contribute to what little contributions I can make to the greater good of the industry. It's very much a passion thing. I followed the areas that I was most passionate about.
So you started off in your family business, DiBara Masonry. And how long did you do that before saying, okay, I'm interested on the other side of things. I'm interested in helping. I've identified a legitimate problem with contractors retaining talent and hiring the right people, and I want to help them. I want to create this other business too.
A lot of accidents, a lot of beautiful accidents. So I grew up in the industry, like you mentioned. So I started working at a really young age. First day on the job, I was 9 years old, picking up
Oh my
trash.
gosh.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know, right? No child labor laws in that family, in our family. Yeah, it was one of those things where I was always excited. My dad used to take pictures with the old cameras that you would go to like a pharmacy and develop. And so, I mean, at 7, 8 years old, every weekend I'd go with my dad. Saturday, we'd develop the film. He'd show me all the things he was building. And so by the time I'm 7, 8 years old, I'm dying to go work in the family business. And
This was
so that's when,
on the East Coast, right?
yes, on the East Coast, and very excited to get involved in what they were doing. And I I believe it was my fourth grade summer. And I had a lot of energy, and I made it 3 days before my mom was finally like, take them. And that was the start of my construction career. But my dad did something pretty smart. He had me start literally at the bottom picking up trash, but then he also built a pay scale. And I remember him sitting, I think I started making $3 an hour, or I wanted to get 25 flat a day. And my dad was like, I'm not doing that. He said, you got to make the extra dollar a day it needs to be by the hour. And so I had a pay scale for everything that I was doing. And so, he said, when you learn how to mix mortar, you make 25 cents an hour more. When you can learn how to cut brick, 10 cents. Like there was he drew it out on a yellow notepad. And so I was very motivated to learn and grow. And so
Learn the
by
skills, yeah.
13, 14, I was running job sites and crews. And it was a quick progression because I was motivated by the money and the fact that my dad gave me a wide lane to just grow in the business.
But were there certain issues that your dad faced with talent that really spoke to you, and you said when you looked around at the industry and you noticed that other contractors other than your father were facing similar issues, and that's why you decided to tackle this?
Well, my dad, so growing up, my dad, he had a lot of you call them like limiting beliefs, right? He'd say things like, nobody ever works as hard as family, or no one's ever going to work as hard as an owner. And I always struggled to understand that because I know a company that started similar to our family, and they had over 1,000 employees. I'm like, how did they get 1,000 employees? And we've got,
While your
25,
family
yeah,
business was smaller?
much smaller
Got
at
it.
the time. And so, my dad was good at running a business. There was a lot of things he was so talented at, but hiring and growing the business wasn't one of them. He really liked the control that he had. But there was a lot of stress with that. I mean, I never saw my dad outside of work. I never, went to a sports game with him. I never, like, none of that stuff as a kid. And anytime we did stuff, if you got a phone call, it was like, oh, and you have to go put out a fire. And that planted a little seed in me at a young age. And then when I got older and eventually relocated the business to California, took it over. I had thought that I had figured out a lot of the stuff that my dad didn't know, like the areas where he was struggling with. I thought I had really paid attention to those. And it was like late 2019, early 2020, where my business, construction company, we had a problem where we couldn't find people. We were struggling to find good people. And it was at the pinnacle of all the work that we were doing. We had multiple crews and all these jobs, and we just couldn't find the right people. And so I got slapped with the same kind of thing that my dad struggled with. And that opened up a whole journey about me saying, like, I need to solve this for me. And that then evolved into a lot of other things.
Because that's a ceiling that you hit. You have this, you and the right people around you have this passion to grow your business and produce really good homes and good structures for your clients. But if you can't find the right people, how are you going to do that? That's a huge limiting factor for your business.
Yeah, and I also saw how it affected me personally. I mean, business is an extension of your life. I mean, if you're like most, owners, or operators or managers, there's a blurry line between personal and business, right? It's like if you're really passionate about what you do, that line becomes blurry. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think when you're struggling, it means you're struggling, and it sometimes bleeds into your personal life. And I was doing a big government job. I was doing the Veterans Memorial Cemetery. I had a huge contract there. I had 2 or 3 celebrity home projects I was doing. And I remember feeling like I had made what this business was meant to be. And I was like the top. Yeah, I remember thinking like my great grandfathers got on a boat from Italy for like, this was what they wanted to build. And, 4 months later, whatever it was, I mean, I couldn't hire and things started to fall apart. And it was the worst feeling, because I think a lot of business owners or managers will relate, is if you have work on the books, it's like somebody took gold, put it in a safe where you could see the gold, and then you can't get it. I was like, I had all this potential profit, all these potential jobs that we had sold, but I did not have the manpower originally to do it. So that really, really motivated me to figure out how I could take control of this, because then as an adult, I'm thinking back to the same thing my dad struggled with. And I'm remembering him leaving family functions and running out because something happened on a job. And I'm like, wow, this has been something our family's really kind of rubbed up against for years, and I need to put an end to it. And that
Otherwise, you're
sparked
heading
that.
down the same path. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the contractor consultants. What do you offer contractors looking to hire talent? There are a lot of different skills that you provide, and I believe even software solutions that you provide them to. Let's dive into all of them.
So it started with, I think for people to know what we do now, like a little bit of where we came from. So I figured out a model after spending about 1.5 years, myself and my co-founder, we figured out a model that worked consistently. And so I fixed my business, and that model came from, consultants, studying other industries, reading books. I mean, I was doing 50 to 80 interviews myself a week. I mean, I let go of the HR team, and I owned the entire process like a mad scientist. I had recruiters and virtual assistants, and I was headline testing all the jobs, but like I went like you'd expect a mad scientist to do if they're like, like trying to figure out how to make a light bulb. Like that was what I was doing. I was like, I need to know all the pieces of data. And we ended up figuring something out. It took us about 1.5 years to really understand, how do you find candidates, fill your pipeline? Well, then great. Now, how do you vet them? Because you have so many people. If you can't quickly vet them, now you're in trouble. Okay. Now, how do you hire them? Do you email the offer letter? Do you bring them into the office? Like, how do you actually get them to sign the offer letter? And then how do you retain them? How do you motivate them, maximize them, excite them? And it was like a circle. When you figured out these 4 steps, find, vet, hire, and retain, it was like you could do this ongoing. The hard part about hiring is, as I was getting advice from people and as I was trying to figure this out, I had companies that had hundreds of employees, thousands, and I would take advice. I would say, what do you do that works? And I would try it in my area, and maybe I'd hire one person and then no one else, or it wouldn't work at all. And I realized that hiring was so specific to the local area, the local competition, the local labor market, that you really had to have a toolbox with all different tools And you had to know, okay, in this area, I'm going to do this and this, and this will work. In this area, maybe I need to do this. For a field position, it might be different than management. So
I
we
was
figured out
just
a
going to say
formula.
that, because like how on earth do you come up with the formula? You talked about the analogy to like start creating a light bulb. That is something physical, it's inanimate, and it's like an objective. It's not subjective. There is a science to it. Here you're dealing with millions of other factors, millions of subjective factors, like you just said. The area, the talent, like a human personality is so subjective. How do you convert that into numbers and come up with the formula?
I think you have to have it's the blend of art and science, and that's why I owned the entire process, because I was so frustrated. I never wanted to. My initial goal wasn't to set out and help anybody else. Like, let me be very clear. That wasn't my initial. My initial goal was to solve my problem, and I wanted, like, if I could have found what we built, if I could have just hired us, I would have done it. I never would. We would have never, myself, co-founder. Like, I don't know. That's what we would have done. It's just that I couldn't find something that consistently worked. And so I got frustrated because I'm like, okay, that worked, but I hired one person. What about the other 7 laborers I need to hire, or the 3 foremen, or, it was just, that was the frustrating part for me. And then I started to feel like, well, maybe it's I'm doing something wrong. But I knew other people then in my contractor network who were trying similar things, and it was working or it wasn't. One person would get amazing results and hire 5 people. 6 people would get no results. And so that was frustrating. So I realized it had to be something where it was formulaic with an artist's lens, right? You had to understand certain things. Like, it's kind of like a chef, right? It's you may have the
A pinch
general
of
meal.
this. What's a pinch?
Yeah,
It's just a pinch. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's like you could have a formula, but then you needed to know, like, you
Yeah.
taste it and you're kind of like, ooh, this needs that. And that's
Yeah.
what hiring became. And so figured out a model. I started teaching other people locally how to do it. And then I started doing webinars and speaking, and really I was so obsessed with it's kind of like a scientist, right? You spend so much time in the lab, and then you're like, here's my findings, this is what works. And I became so passionate about sharing this because I knew that people were going to benefit, and that spiraled into making a course. So we made a course called the Contractor Hiring Course, 63 video modules, and I think we had in there, when we were done, I think there were 37 ways to find candidates, to give you an idea of like how
Wow.
detailed we were. And it was just like summarizing the things that we found in video form that was very easy to digest. And then as we started to launch that course, which was all a passion project at this point, it was like, I spent so many hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars and just like obsessed. I told myself, if I don't figure this out, I'll shut down the company. So it was like, this was my all or nothing. And once we did, and we had the formula, and we had the course, went to launch it, one of the things we got for feedback online, it's actually, to be totally honest with you, one of the first comments when we were doing the testing of the ads was, somebody was like, hey, you fake guru, if you're so good at helping people, why don't you just do it? Like, you don't need to teach us. And I remember thinking, I was like, he's right. I said, why don't we look at what it would look like to do this? And so this set a whole nother quest. It was like, if we're going to take the course now and look at what we would need to do for companies, then it became, all right, how do we disrupt the traditional hiring model? Recruiting agencies that overcharge and underdeliver, staffing agencies that ruin culture, right? And charge, and you don't actually have the people embedded within your company. Like, what does this industry need? And so that's, fast forward to today, like, that is what we do. We have a model that we can become a hiring partner with companies. So we come in and we do it for them. So our belief is that we shouldn't just tell you what to do, but we should take things off your list. So it's as easy as, like, let's say you wanted to have us do the hiring for you in your company. We would start with an understanding of the roles you need, and then we would handle all of the candidate generation. So we would generate all the leads, all the resumes. We would screen them in real time. 3 to 5 minutes, they're going to get a phone call from our team. We'll do an initial screening interview, and we will only put people on your calendar that are final, vetted, and approved, meaning they meet your criteria. So you're no longer wasting your time posting on job platforms, screening resumes, doing initial screening calls, and we do it for a low monthly fee that is flexible and has different tiers.
Tears.
in need versus if you're more kind of, hey, I've done my hiring now and I'm more passive. So we solve the biggest issue in a way that's contractor friendly and thinks about helping the contractor and giving them the data. So as a construction business owner, one of the things we found was if you're hiring a recruiter, the big issue is when you get down to it, you do your second, third round interview, you're talking about 20% typically of their salary. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if you're on the fence of whether or not to hire them,
That's a lot of money to put up.
a lot of money. So what we found is because our service is flat rate, companies have no issue trying people. They're like, well, we'll bring them in. They should be good. And we find that the stick rate on people who they try that they wouldn't otherwise have hired if there was a recruiter's fee is so much higher. And so there's these all these really neat kind of downstream effects of us just taking this over. But we get very granular. I mean, I can get into our formula and how we do this, but yeah, it's
That would
really
be awesome. I'm still trying to figure out how you managed to turn all this, because you have obviously done a ton of data mining, talking to all these companies, trying to figure out all this stuff, putting it into numbers and formulae, and I would love to dive into the details of that. But let's talk about some of the companies that you have helped. Like, do you have some examples or customer testimonials or of companies that actually hired on like 100 new people that they were really looking to hire, but they just couldn't find them until they came across your platform and your solution?
I mean, we have a testimonial video. So clients they'll ask you, they'll say, hey, what is it like? Can we hear from people? And we literally have a video that's just like cut after cut after cut after cut of just companies saying, you saved us time. I can't believe how easy this was. We made 3 hires, within such a short period of time. I think every company has a little bit of a different experience in the sense that maybe somebody's trying to hire a bunch of people in a short period of time. Maybe it's a C-suite level role that is really hard to find, and we help them do that without the recruiter fees. Or, maybe it's a senior field role, like a foreman or a site superintendent. So like the specific call out that we're complimented on is different, but I think what everyone says about us is that we simplified the process and we saved them a bunch of time. And that's what's really, I think back to my dad as a kid running out at a family function, my sister's birthday party as a little kid, right? And he's running out because something happened. And I'm like, we get to impact that. And that's a really cool thing that we get to do as a company.
And that's a trickle effect, right? Because you're not just positively affecting one person. It's everyone in the organization. You're helping the people that are hired as well, who are looking for the right fit, the right group to be a part of. There are so many people that you are helping through this consulting business. It's a very cool thing that you've built. How large is your group?
So we have 87 different construction related industries. So, that's like moving, that could be, we even do security, but it's construction specific. And then we're doing it in the US and Canada right now. And we're looking at when we're going to enter the UK and Australia markets. So very quick, very fast growing. We onboarded 47 clients, something mid 40s last month. So, we're growing very quickly. We're helping a lot of contractors. But I think, the biggest thing for me is we help great companies make great hires, and we help great hires find great companies. That's what we do. And it's cool to see testimonials from the companies and also the candidates. But like you mentioned, there's a formula. We just got some data here from a headline test we did. So like most companies can't get to a candidate within 3 to 5 minutes like we can, right? They can't call them up right away. They can't answer when the candidate calls back. We have a dedicated team that does that. But we also do a lot of data and analytics for optimizing job postings, and we audit their local competitors to help position this company, our client, as the best, employer choice when a candidate's looking. We look into like their employer brand. So we ask this question of, would you work for you? Meaning, if you didn't know anything else about your company, but what you see online, do you have a career page that showcases photos of the work? Do you have a concise 3 to 5 benefits, like super targeted bullet points that would excite any candidate and want to work for you?
So it's not just You Wow, so you are talking about a ton of different things now. You're not talking about just a career page. You're talking about the company's presence online, their overall website, the first impression, the hits when you Google them. Are they the first? Are they the 100th? Their presence, the SEO optimization of their website, and all that stuff. Are you covering all that when you advise these companies?
There's a formula. So it starts with really understanding. If we were to break it down in its simplest form, right? It starts with the candidate's perspective. So most companies can tell me, here's what I always find interesting. So I've done a lot of talks where I'll ask companies, I'll say, hey, raise your hand if you know your revenue target for the year. Like, you're doing 1 million, you want to go to 2. You're doing 2, you want to go to 3. Like, most companies know where they want to go revenue wise. Okay. Most companies know a rough idea of the org structure they have right now? Maybe it's formal and it sits in it's a formal org chart, right? Where you got your solid lines and your dotted line community. Like, maybe it's really formal, or maybe it's just a manager or an owner could tell you, hey, Michael does this, Shaq does that, Jane does this, right? But when we ask them, we say, all right, if you go from 1 million to 2 million, how many people do you need to hire? What roles are they? And how confident are you that you can hire those people? That's the big question. Because we find that, like, to go from 1 million to 2 million, it's not usually, can we confidently find more work? It's, do we have the people to support the revenue target? And when we take companies' goals and we boil it down into the people they need, because in construction, we're not like software, right?
Yes.
Software company, you might be able to improve your marketing and one salesperson can sell a lot
Outsource
more,
it
right?
if you need to.
Yeah, outsource it, right? It's construction as a whole is typically, it's linear in the sense of like more revenue means more people and typically more, it's a semi-capital intensive business. And so we help companies understand usually your bottleneck to your revenue goals isn't just finding more work.
Yeah.
It's finding the right people to fit these roles. And so we start with uncovering like, how big of a problem is this? And for most companies, it's big. Either they can't do what they already had, they can't sustain the revenue they have right now easily, or it's a bottleneck to them growing. Like, any company usually falls within one of those two things. They want to grow, they need people to grow, or they need the right people to streamline the growth and revenue they already have. And so we start with that. And then we don't start with that. That's a big part of it. And then we look at the candidate's perspective. So most companies know their competitors when it comes to work. Meaning, if I tell them, hey, who are your top 3 competitors? Who's the company that if you bid against them, every time you'll lose because they just lowball work and you never can compete? Who's the company where you bid against them and they're super high overpriced and you'll always get the job and you're excited? Most businesses have some idea of that. What most businesses don't know is who their hiring competitors are. If I type in, let's say I'm a plumbing company, and I type in, plumbing tech role and then my city, who comes up? What are they offering? What are they saying to entice candidates? What are they paying? And so when you start to break this down, it's how important is it for you to hire? Well, if you want to grow, it's probably pretty important. Or if you're struggling to sustain what you already have, it's probably pretty important. Now it's, well, who are you competing with?
Yeah.
Who are your hiring competitors? Like, what's the lay of the land? Because when you sell a job, you might sell one project, right? And you do that job and maybe you get lucky that homeowner or that contractor uses you again. But if you acquire a candidate, if you bring somebody into your team and you do a good job, you could keep them there for 5, 10, 15 years. So we got to win that battle. And so everything we do is designed from how do we make our clients most likely to capture the local demand and most likely to not have that candidate want to go anywhere else.
That's pretty cool. Are you targeting the contractors in the residential space or the commercial space? Or you're pretty agnostic to that?
Agnostic. We do both.
But is that a completely different skill set that's just another factor that you have accounted for in your business model? Because the skills required in a residential construction is completely different than that of a commercial construction.
That's why we specialize in construction. So we are able to, like, the questions you'd ask a candidate in a commercial
Yeah.
sector is different than residential. Expectations are different, right? Like, you might expect a better resume. Like, we call it, like, the way I look at it is like resume forgiveness, right? It's like there's certain roles that it's like, is this resume really needed? Do they, some of the formalities and things, like, for example, you might, in a residential company, let's take a mason, right? You might have a mason who's been in the industry 20 years. Maybe he or she doesn't have the best resume, but you're probably not looking for them to build out resumes as the main skill set for their job. You're probably looking for them to lay brick and block and things like that. So they don't always go hand in hand. A great hire doesn't always mean a great resume. But if I'm a commercial, like one of our commercial clients does over 100 million a year, if he's hiring for a commercial estimator, they better have a good resume because they're
Yeah.
presenting well to clients and things like that. So we've kind of figured out different questions to ask. We figured out different ways to approach different hiring pathways. But there's a lot of behind the scenes that we do. And it's funny to talk with you about it today because we don't really get into a lot of this with our clients. We're just like, hey, we'll own the end result and we'll put the right people on your calendar. But
But
yeah, there's the
that's what
so much.
makes your company such a good one, because they don't need to know the weeds of it. They want, all they care about is trusting you and being able to offload that mental strain of hiring a good person that's a good fit for the company. They don't need to know exactly the science behind it and the database, all that stuff, all the hard work that you've put into it. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of how things are done. That is not celebrated. The outcome is the only thing that is celebrated. Like, did that, at the end of the day, did that person that you recommended work for them? Did it work out? Was it a good fit? Was your customer happy? That's the only thing that matters.
100%. And that's, I mean, like I was mentioning earlier, we have, so I got some data back on a test. So we do a lot of headline testing, and one of our clients, so when we run job ads, we split test headlines. And so our client had hiring construction project manager as a headline, and they received 10 what we call quality applications, meaning applications that you would call on to schedule a phone interview and screen. We ended up doing a split test, and the winning headline was Elevate Your Career, Project Management Opportunity in Cutting Edge Construction. That received same exact job ad in terms of the actual body of the ad, but that headline received 3.5 times almost. So it's 36 qualified applicants. But most companies, when you talk to a company, it's like, well, do you have time to headline test? Do you have, I mean, we might screen through hundreds of thousands of resumes in a month. So it's like, when we have all this data, when we have the formula, when we have the background, we just have tools that even a company that is, might have a 500 or 1,000 employees, if you're not understanding the algorithm on an Indeed, or, when and if you should use it, a ZipRecruiter, or like what job platforms then broadcast to others, like there's so much nuance to this that I
It's
think we found.
fascinating to hear you talk, Matt. Just the way you analyze these things, that to me at first thought, it's just something that's a problem. I can't even wrap my head around how to solve this problem. And you have distilled it down to the basic questions and turned it into a formula, and tested it and done these continuous improvements on it. It's fascinating to hear to talk about all this stuff. You're really passionate about it.
Well, I mean, the goal is to help, contractors across the country now. I mean, I think we've got the best model and the best team to do this. And so now it's about showing companies what we can take off their plate and owning the end result. I mean, what I'm most proud of is that we're one of the few companies that I'm aware of in general, meaning any vendor that a construction company would hire, we're one of the few companies that it's almost like yes, no hiring, right? So you tell us, hey, this is what we're looking for. Great. Boom. Next thing, here's the job description. Tell us yes, tell us no. Any changes you want to make. Great. Okay. Hey, here's pre-screened candidates. They're on your calendar. Do the interview. Tell us yes, tell us no, and why. Like, we've built a model where we take all of this weight off of the companies. I think that's the important thing. I think us being a company that are able to be judged on the results we give to companies is really exciting. And that's what makes me most passionate, I think, about. And that and saving money, recruiters' fees. We have an internal tracker. And so we take the monthly fee that they pay us and we
And you can
subtract it
compare
from
it to other recruiters. Yeah. And that's a
that.
huge selling point for your business.
Yep. Yeah. The average recruiter's fee is about a year of our service. So for what you pay for a typical position with a recruiter, you could have us doing 3 different job roles for almost a year. So I mean, we're here to really change the expectation of what good hiring looks like and who as a company has access to good hiring.
How do you deal with union work? Because the construction industry is, as we know, subcontractors use a lot of union workers. Sometimes the number of union workers is mandated by the state. How do you approach that, or do you stay away from that side of the business?
I think someday we'll be working directly with the unions, helping them fill their union halls. But right now, if you have union labor, obviously you have to go through, you have to go through the union. But anybody that's like considered open shop, so that's usually like your project manager, your estimator, like those don't always fall under union guidelines. So it's for the company to let us know. But if you have people that are not under the union guidelines, we can hire for. Um, but yeah, if they're union, we're not. I think someday we'll work with the halls, though. I think we'll work directly with the unions someday is my goal.
That could be a tough nut to crack, because that's a that's a very difficult problem that every single company complains about for legitimate reasons. So if you're able to solve that, you can be the most valuable hiring company in the states, I think.
Cool.
That's the goal. So let's talk about some other goals that you have. What are your future plans for the business? You have accomplished a lot in a very short period of time, and clearly you talked about taking the contractor consultants global. Do you have some other concrete plans for the business or the other businesses that are in development too?
Yeah, I mean the masonry company's growing. I mean I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid. So we hire for that business and that business is growing. I think my biggest passion right now lies as far as I can see out. This is my big mission. And I think we'll be the source for hiring and construction. I think most companies that want to grow their business and want to hire, I think will either consider working with us or work with us. And that's the goal, is to help. I mean, we set a goal of 1 million contractors, construction related companies, and that's the target. And we're
How
we're gonna get up every day to do it.
how many companies have you helped so far?
Oh my
Or you-
gosh, hundreds of companies.
Hundreds.
But I mean, we're exponentially growing at this point. Like a lot of in our business model, it's we've grown. And I mean, I think one of the biggest things is figuring out what's the simplest, easiest ways to grow. I mean, we're at a phase in the company where I think we're going to go into hyper growth. I mean, we're growing very quickly as it is, but I mean, it's exponential. So,
Are you
I'm very
concerned
interested.
about taking this abroad? Because you talked about having a presence in Canada already. But once you go across the ocean to Europe and Australia, there are you concerned that the markets over there are just completely different and would have to build entirely new different business models? Or have you developed something that's pretty country agnostic in a way?
I think we're still testing that. The early data is showing that we're gonna have no issues when we decide to do that. Because it's the core principles remain the same, right? It's like you have a company that has a need, and there's a great need over there. You have candidates that follow a few pathways to find work, and are accessible in a few different ways. And so when you start to just break it down in its most elementary kind of data points, it's like plenty of companies need it. The candidates, there's a limited candidate pool. We know how to access them. We know how to attract people either back into the industry that maybe left, and how to approach that side of the coin. So I think we're gonna test that rigorously before we scale into it. But the early data is looking good.
You obviously really young, you have created, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, quite a name for yourself in our industry, in our old school resistant to change industry. And so what advice would you have for a young professional coming into this industry that has identifies really legitimate problems like you did very early on in your career and wants to do something different to help our industry be more efficient.
I mean, I think you need to, number one, you need to be really passionate about it. I mean, I can really look at what I did, but I think passion is your fuel. And when things get tough, you're going to tap into that fuel tank. So it needs to be something you're really, really, really passionate about, and have a bigger why. I mean, our why was really big. Our culture is really big in terms of why we're doing this. I think that's a huge key part. The other thing is looking at problems that I wouldn't set out, and this is probably contrary to a lot of people, but I would set out to solve the problems that you're most excited by solving, not the problems you think you can solve. And those are two different things. So, for example, I might look at something where, I'm like, oh, I want to improve at my company something with culture. And I'm coming from a place of, I think I can do that, right? The how, I'm confident. Versus the real thing is you want to solve the culture issue in construction across the board. I wouldn't lower the target. I would keep the target high and be authentic with your target. And then I would get into the weeds and I would be in the general vicinity of what it is you want to solve. So if it's like, let's say it's culture, right? I would be in a company, in a role that is involved in culture, or I'm getting enough experience where I could consult with companies. But I think one of the biggest things is I see the difference between young people working on a target that they think they can achieve, or setting a target because they think they can achieve it, versus the target that's going to keep them up late at night and wake them up in the morning because they're motivated by what it would mean if they were to solve something much bigger or better or more invigorating.
That's such excellent advice, and it's your personality is so energetic. I'm motivated just talking to you about all this stuff, and what you're talking about just sparked another thought in my head. Like, we've all seen that McKinsey graph about how the AEC industry is, in terms of productivity, it's just stagnant compared to all the other industries, the automobile industry and everything else. So our industry just remains stagnant, and everyone. And this is not a bad thing. I'm just referring to how people have approached this idea of lack of productivity in different ways. There are people who have turned to 3D printing. There are other people that have turned to robotics, humanoid robots, or other robots, automation in the more robotic sense. And you have identified, okay, there is a lack of productivity, but what's going on in the real workplace? There's lack of productivity in that sense too. And that's slowing our industry down. That's holding us back. So it's just fascinating because all these other companies I talk to approach it in a very different way, and you're approaching it on a more human scale. That is, it's very impressive how you have managed to convert something so subjective into a successful business model that's run on data and science and logic. Anyway, I just wanted to end with that and applaud you for what you have built. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Contractor Consultants have a more global presence and help out companies around the world.
I appreciate that. And, I wish I could sit here and take all the credit. I think there's 104 years of family that worked in construction before I took over. I mean, we have a team across the country that, I couldn't be more proud of the people we brought into the team and how we bring our family, our culture at the Contractor Consultants is about people within the industry who want to make a difference, want to get behind a mission, and our clients who just want to elevate their company, elevate their hiring. I mean, it's gotten so much bigger than what I ever would have imagined. And I think, hats off to everybody that's been a part of this. And I think, to that young person, it's, if you, really dig deep on what the goal is that you want to solve, what do you want to leave, behind at this time we're here on this big rock, not to get too philosophical, but, I think it's the big target sometimes that, there's two ways of thinking about it. One is likelihood of solving the target, and one is impact if I were to solve it. I think, you have to pick which one you want to do. Do you want to go for the thing that statistically you're more likely to achieve, or do you want to go for the thing that if you were to achieve it, look at sports teams, right? It's like the statistics of getting into to a professional league is so low, but, should somebody in high school set the bar to just get on a good college team if they want to be pro? I don't know. I think you have different ways of looking at it. I think that mentality, I'm hoping to see a bigger shift in construction where people start, we strive for bigger goals. We are more motivated by the goal than the likelihood that we're going to achieve it. I mean, Elon Musk is trying to go to Mars. Great example, right? It's like big target, but his odds aren't there, but it's, the target is.
Yeah. And maybe if and you come from a family that thinks long term, it's a generational business that your great grandparents set up. And even if, I don't think so, but even if you don't achieve the target that you have set for your lifetime, it could be reached by the next, by the generation right after you. And that's kind of like what you were saying with Elon. He's creating the pathway for either his family or someone else to take over and eventually get to that sometimes unattainable goal.
Yeah, and I think a lot, like if you look at a lot of different inventions, let's say, right? Like, what do they say? Like, the ballpoint pen. One came from the other. Meaning, like I think the ballpoint pen example of that came from roll-on deodorant, right? Like, there's these examples where maybe you strive for a target, but the contribution's there, and I think we're at a point where what Elon's done, I think more than anything, is he's inspired people to think bigger. And I think the goal is how can we do that in construction? How do we get companies thinking bigger? How do we get team members thinking bigger? How do we get the industry motivated to achieve great things? And I think we're right at the corner on that. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm a glass half full kind of guy.
Yeah, definitely. It's pretty obvious during this discussion. But thank you, Matt, for inspiring all of us, definitely for inspiring me, and for sharing your story, sharing the details of how your contractor consultants works. And like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing your business grow and take over and help companies worldwide.
No, I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.